My sister-in-law stole my dog for ransom after I kicked her out for stealing from me. Me, 38F, and my husband Dan, 40M, have been married for 12 years. We have 2 kids, Emily, 10F, and Josh, 8M. We live in a modest suburb and have what most would consider a pretty normal life. Dan's sister, Jenna, 36F, has always been a bit of a wild card. She's struggled with addiction and has been in and out of rehab over the years. Despite her issues, we've always tried to be supportive and have welcomed her into our home when she's needed a place to stay. About 6 months ago, Jenna reached out to us saying she was finally clean and sober and wanted to get her life back on track. She had completed a long-term rehab program and was looking for a fresh start. Against my better judgment, Dan convinced me to let her stay with us for a few months until she could get back on her feet. At first, things were going well. Jenna seemed genuinely committed to her sobriety and was actively looking for a job. She was also great with Emily and Josh, who had always adored their cool aunt. But then, things started to go downhill. I began noticing small amounts of cash missing from my purse or around the house. At first, I didn't think much of it, but the amounts kept getting larger. When I confronted Jenna about it, she vehemently denied taking any money and accused me of being paranoid. One day, I came home early from work and caught Jenna red-handed. She was sitting on the couch, counting out a wad of cash while my jewelry box lay open in front of her. I was devastated and furious. Jenna had been stealing from us for weeks, maybe even months. Not only had she been taking cash, but she had also been pawning off my jewelry and other valuables. I felt violated and betrayed in my own home. When Dan got home from work, I immediately told him what had happened. He was in shock and refused to believe that his sister would do something like that. He accused me of overreacting and making assumptions. Despite Dan's denial, I insisted that we confront Jenna together. When we sat her down, she initially tried to deny everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. She eventually broke down and admitted that she had been stealing from us to support her drug habit. Dan was crushed. He had truly believed that Jenna was on the path to recovery. I felt terrible for him, but I was also angry that she had taken advantage of our trust and hospitality. We gave Jenna an ultimatum: either she checked herself back into rehab immediately, or we would have no choice but to involve the police. After much pleading and crying, she agreed to go to rehab. We thought that would be the end of it, but Jenna's betrayal had left a deep wound in our family. Dan was struggling to come to terms with his sister's relapse, and I was having a hard time trusting her again. The situation only got worse from there. Jenna lasted less than a month in rehab before she checked herself out against medical advice. She started calling us incessantly, begging for money and a place to stay. At first, we ignored her calls, but she became increasingly desperate and erratic. She showed up at our house uninvited, banging on the door and screaming for us to let her in. We were terrified of what she might do next, so we decided to change the locks and install a security system. But Jenna was relentless. She would lurk around our property, leaving threatening notes and making disturbing comments to our children. We knew we couldn't go on living like this, constantly looking over our shoulders and fearing for our safety. We had no choice but to take legal action. We filed for a restraining order against Jenna, which only seemed to fuel her rage. She started making vague threats about getting even and making us pay. One night, we came home to find our front door wide open and the house ransacked. Jenna had broken in and trashed the place, smashing valuables and leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. The final straw came when we discovered that Jenna had stolen our beloved family dog, Buddy. We were devastated, and the kids were inconsolable. We immediately reported Buddy as missing and suspected that Jenna had taken him as a twisted form of revenge. The police advised us to be vigilant and to keep our doors and windows locked at all times. For weeks, we lived in constant fear, jumping at every sound and struggling to sleep at night. We had no idea what Jenna was capable of or where she might strike next. Then, one day, we received a chilling ransom note demanding a large sum of money in exchange for Buddy's safe return. We were faced with an impossible decision: pay the ransom and enable Jenna's criminal behavior, or risk never seeing our beloved pet again. After much agonizing, we decided to involve the police and let them handle the situation. They set up a sting operation, and miraculously, they were able to apprehend Jenna and rescue Buddy unharmed. Jenna was charged with burglary, theft, and extortion, among other crimes. She faced significant jail time, and the judge issued a strict no-contact order to protect our family. While we were relieved to have Buddy back safe and sound, the legal battle was far from over. Jenna's lawyers tried to paint her as a victim of her addiction, pleading for leniency and treatment rather than incarceration. We had to testify in court, reliving the trauma of Jenna's actions and the fear we had experienced during her campaign of terror. It was an emotionally draining process, but in the end, justice prevailed, and Jenna was sentenced to several years in prison. Even with Jenna behind bars, the emotional scars of her betrayal ran deep. Dan struggled with feelings of guilt and responsibility, blaming himself for enabling her behavior and not recognizing the warning signs sooner. The kids were traumatized by the experience and had nightmares about their aunt breaking into our home again. They had idolized Jenna, and it was hard for them to reconcile the loving aunt they thought they knew with the person who had terrorized our family. As for me, I was left with a profound sense of violation and mistrust. Our home, which had once been a safe haven, now felt tainted by Jenna's actions. It took a long time for me to feel truly secure again. While our family has slowly begun to heal, the events of that traumatic period will forever be a part of our history. We learned a harsh lesson about the dangers of enabling addiction and the importance of setting firm boundaries, even with loved ones. Looking back, I wish we had been more proactive in getting Jenna the help she needed before things spiraled so far out of control. But we can't change the past, we can only move forward, stronger and wiser, and cherish the bonds that truly matter. Break Story 2. Me, 38F, and my husband Jim, 40M, had been together for 15 years. We met in college and fell madly in love. After graduation, we got married and settled down in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Our life was picture perfect, until my mother-in-law, Karen, 65F, came into the picture. Karen was a manipulative, narcissistic woman who had always been jealous of my relationship with her son. She would constantly criticize me, belittle my accomplishments, and try to drive a wedge between Jim and me. Despite her best efforts, our bond remained strong, and we tried to maintain a civil relationship with her for the sake of family harmony. Karen's behavior became increasingly erratic and concerning over the years. She would show up unannounced at our house, make passive-aggressive comments about our lifestyle choices, and even go through our personal belongings when we weren't home. Jim and I had always dreamed of having children, but Karen's toxic presence made us hesitant. We didn't want to bring a child into such a volatile environment. However, after years of trying, we finally conceived our miracle baby, a beautiful daughter we named Emily. Karen's behavior worsened after Emily's birth. She would often insist on babysitting, only to disregard our parenting instructions and do things her way. We caught her trying to feed Emily solid foods before she was ready, and she would constantly contradict our decisions in front of Emily, undermining our authority as parents. One day, when Emily was around 6 months old, I came home early from work to find Karen in our living room, holding Emily. She was feeding her something from a jar, and Emily was fussing and turning her head away. "What are you doing?" I asked, alarmed. Karen turned to me with a smug grin. "Just giving Emily a little taste of grown-up food. She's a big girl now, and she needs something more substantial than that watered-down baby formula." I rushed over and snatched Emily from her arms. "You know we're not introducing solids until she's at least a year old." Karen scoffed. "Oh, please. I raised 3 children, and they all turned out just fine. You two are being overprotective." That night, Emily developed a severe bout of diarrhea and vomiting. We rushed her to the emergency room, where the doctor informed us that she had likely ingested something her delicate digestive system couldn't handle. Jim and I were furious. We knew exactly who was responsible for Emily's condition. Karen had completely disregarded our instructions and put our daughter's health at risk. After Emily recovered, we decided to confront Karen about her behavior. We invited her over for a serious discussion, hoping to set some much-needed boundaries. When Karen arrived, we sat her down and calmly explained our concerns. We told her that her actions had endangered Emily's well-being and that we could no longer trust her alone with our daughter. Karen's reaction was explosive. She accused us of being ungrateful and controlling, claiming that she was just trying to help. "I raised 3 children without any of your newfangled parenting advice, and they all turned out fine," she shouted. Jim tried to reason with her, but she was having none of it. "If you're going to be like this, then I want nothing to do with you or that brat," she spat, referring to Emily. We were stunned by her vicious outburst. Jim and I had always tried to maintain a respectful relationship with Karen, but her behavior had crossed a line. "Mom, you need to leave," Jim said firmly, "and you're not welcome back until you can treat us and Emily with respect." Karen glared at us, her eyes burning with hatred. "Fine. Don't come crying to me when you realize how much you need me." With that, she stormed out of our house, slamming the door behind her. For a while, we thought we had seen the last of Karen's toxic behavior. We focused on raising Emily and enjoying our little family. But little did we know, Karen was just biding her time, plotting her revenge. A few months later, we received a disturbing call from the police. They informed us that Karen had filed a report accusing us of child abuse and neglect. We were shocked and outraged. Karen had taken her vendetta to a whole new level, putting our entire family at risk with her malicious lies. The police were obligated to investigate, and a social worker was assigned to our case. They conducted interviews with us, Emily's pediatrician, and even our neighbors, searching for any evidence to support Karen's claims. During the investigation, Karen continued to make our lives a living hell. She would show up unannounced, demanding to see Emily and accusing us of keeping her grandchild from her. One day, she even tried to barge into our home while we were out, but thankfully our neighbors intervened and called the police. The stress of the situation was taking a toll on our family. Emily, who was now a toddler, could sense the tension and would often become fussy and clingy. We tried to shield her from the drama as much as possible, but it was becoming increasingly difficult with Karen's constant harassment. After months of investigation, the social worker and the police found no evidence to support Karen's claims of abuse or neglect. They concluded that her accusations were unfounded and motivated by personal grievances. However, Karen refused to back down. She continued to harass us, making our lives a living nightmare. We knew we had to take drastic action to protect our family. Jim and I consulted with a lawyer, who advised us to pursue a restraining order against Karen. It was a difficult decision, but we felt we had no other choice. We gathered evidence of Karen's harassment, including recordings of her verbal attacks, witness statements from our neighbors, and documentation of her attempts to gain unauthorized access to our home. Armed with this evidence, we filed for a restraining order, prohibiting Karen from coming within a certain distance of our family or contacting us in any way. Karen, of course, fought the order tooth and nail. She claimed that we were overreacting and that she was simply trying to be a loving grandmother. The court battle was long and emotionally draining, but in the end, the judge saw through Karen's lies and granted us the restraining order. For a brief period, the restraining order provided us with some much-needed peace and respite from Karen's harassment. We were able to focus on our family and rebuild some semblance of normalcy in our lives. However, Karen's vindictive nature knew no bounds. She began to find ways to circumvent the restraining order, stalking us from a distance and engaging in a campaign of psychological torment. She would leave disturbing notes on our doorstep, detailing how we were unfit parents and how she would eventually take back Emily. She would make anonymous phone calls, breathing heavily into the receiver until one of us answered. We reported each and every violation of the restraining order to the police, but Karen was crafty and often left no concrete evidence of her involvement. Finally, after one particularly chilling incident where she left a dead animal on our doorstep, the police were able to gather enough evidence to arrest her for violating the restraining order. Karen was charged with multiple counts of harassment and stalking, facing potential jail time and hefty fines. We were relieved that the law was finally taking her actions seriously, but the emotional toll of her campaign of terror would leave lasting scars. During the legal proceedings, Karen's true colors were revealed to the world. Her narcissistic behavior and lack of remorse were on full display as she tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming that we had turned her own grandchild against her. The judge saw through her lies and handed down a harsh sentence, 2 years in prison and a permanent restraining order prohibiting her from ever contacting us again. As Karen was led away in handcuffs, she turned to us and snarled, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." We knew her threats were empty, but the experience had shaken us to our core. We were grateful for the legal system's intervention, but the emotional scars would take time to heal. In the aftermath of Karen's imprisonment, our family was left to pick up the pieces and recover from the trauma she had inflicted upon us. Emily, who was now old enough to understand what had transpired, struggled with feelings of confusion and betrayal. How could her own grandmother, someone who was supposed to love and protect her, have treated us so cruelly? We sought counseling to help Emily process her emotions and rebuild her sense of trust and security. It was a long and difficult journey, but with time and patience, we were able to help her understand that Karen's actions were a reflection of her own twisted personality, not a consequence of anything Emily had done. Looking back on our ordeal with Karen, I can't help but feel a mixture of anger, sadness, and ultimately, relief. Anger at the depths of her depravity and the lengths she was willing to go to inflict pain on our family. Sadness for the loss of what could have been a loving relationship between a grandmother and her grandchild. And relief that we were able to emerge from her toxic clutches stronger and more resilient than ever before. Our experience taught us the importance of setting firm boundaries and protecting our family from toxic influences, no matter how deeply ingrained they may be. It also reinforced the power of love, perseverance, and the legal system in the face of malicious behavior. While the emotional scars may never fully heal, we can take solace in the fact that Karen's reign of terror is over, and our family is free to move forward, embracing the love and happiness we so rightfully deserve.